We're on our way to the town hall meeting, and I can't help but wonder how many witnesses are going to show up with how many stories. Clearly, there must be a lot of Bigfoots that live in this area because the habitat is absolutely perfect. However, not a lot of people live in this area, and you need both of those things to have a Bigfoot encounter, a Bigfoot and a person to see the thing.
If you have seen or heard a Sasquatch, raise your hand.
What made this sound so different?
I don't know. It was something that brought chills up on me when I heard it.
So then you actually had a physical response to this?
That's what scared me. I'd never heard anything like that.
When the forest falls silent, it's not always empty. Tonight, we delve into the most disturbing Bigfoot trail cam footage ever captured. 6 encounters so chilling, they'll make you question every shadow and every sound the woods hide. What you're about to see isn't just a story, it's a warning. On this episode of Animal Planet, the BFRO crew heads to the town hall, drawn by reports of a creature that has haunted the forests for decades. The surrounding wilderness is dense, silent, perfect Bigfoot territory. But locals know the truth. This isn't just a legend. Every snap of a branch, every rustle in the underbrush, could mean something is watching from the shadows. When the moderator asks, "If you've seen or heard a Sasquatch, raise your hand," hands slowly rise, one by one, until the room is filled with stories too strange, too terrifying to ignore.
We're on our way to the town hall meeting, and I can't help but wonder how many witnesses are going to show up with how many stories. Clearly, there must be a lot of Bigfoots that live in this area because the habitat is absolutely perfect. However, not a lot of people live in this area, and you need both of those things to have a Bigfoot encounter, a Bigfoot and a person to see the thing.
If you have seen or heard a Sasquatch, raise your hand.
The night pressed in like a living thing, thick shadows swallowing the empty January road. Around 9 o'clock, the witnesses' headlights caught something impossible, a towering black figure, hunched and silent, emerging from the darkness at the edge of the road. As the car passed, a blood-curdling screech ripped through the still night, freezing every instinct. For a long, trembling moment, one thought consumed them. What kind of creature could move through the darkness like that, and why was it watching?
It's about 9 o'clock at night, January, so pitch black. Driving down the road, and I saw this huge black figure, way taller than my car, hunched over the side of the road. And as I passed it, I heard a screech. It was enough to make me be like, what was that?
The forest wasn't just dark, it was alive. In August 2012, a witness and a friend walked down the remote river road, unaware they were being followed. 30 to 40 yards behind, the trees seemed to shiver with movement. Twigs snapping, sticks cracking, ferns rustling under a weight that shouldn't exist. Every step echoed like a warning. Despite years in the Air Force and life-threatening situations overseas, the witness had never felt fear like this. Raw, instinctive, paralyzing. The unknown pressed in, heavy and suffocating, turning the night into a living nightmare.
My incident happened last year in August of 2012. I was actually up here with a friend of mine. We had walked down a road called the River Road, and as we were walking, someone or something was following us 30 or 40 yards behind us. We could hear twigs breaking, sticks being crunched in the undergrowth. We could hear a lot of ferns getting pushed around. I've been deployed with the Air Force to the Middle East. I've been under enemy fire. I've been in other frightening situations. I've never had that kind of flight mentality, flight reaction to something in my life like I did that night.
Just when they thought the night couldn't get stranger, another story unfolded. Driving cautiously along the empty stretch M28, the witness saw a massive figure appear on the side of the road, nearly 9 feet tall, covered in matted, sandy brown hair. It stepped into the road with a deliberate, predatory stride. The air felt heavy, alive. Her heart raced, every instinct screaming to look away, but she couldn't. Even after it vanished, the memory lingered, a haunting presence that refused to leave.
We were headed east on M28, and bam, on the left side of the road is a Bigfoot. It's 8.5 foot. It's a dirty, sandy brown, and it just completely strides across the road.
Her heart pounded as she slammed her hands on the steering wheel. From the lakeside of the road, a massive figure sprang toward the hillside with unnerving speed and precision. It paused just long enough to lock eyes before crossing in 3 enormous, deliberate steps. The image of those steps, powerful, calculated, and utterly unnatural, would haunt her long after the night ended.
I'm screaming at the dash, she's screaming at the steering wheel. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God.
No, it went from the lake side of the road to the hill side of the road.
Towards the hill.
Yeah.
And it stopped as we passed it.
Do you recall how many steps it took as it crossed the road?
3 max.
During a recent BFRO expedition, the team reached the top of a remote ridge just after 8:30 p.m., unaware something extraordinary was about to happen. Shadows shifted in the dense foliage with silent, deliberate grace. Then, out of nowhere, 2 pale lights appeared, blinking faintly in the darkness, less than 20 yards away. Their icy glow made the forest seem to hold its breath. Every instinct screamed. They were not alone.
We had some activity occur just a few months ago during a BFRO expedition that Larry would like to talk about.
We went up to the top of this ridge. It was about 8:30 at night, and I thought I saw something come up over the top of the ridge and start moving through the foliage. And at one point I looked over my shoulder and I thought I saw 1 light, 2 lights, we could see them blink. It had to be less than 20 yards.
Is it kind of like white light?
Whitish blue, very pale blue.
Just 2 hours earlier, a single howl ripped through those same trees. So chilling it seemed to vibrate straight through his ribs. It came from no more than 30 yards away. After that, whatever owned the voice seemed to follow.
2 hours prior, a loud and very clear howl of some kind that made you almost shake to your core. I mean, it was very, very loud, and that was up in that direction, 25, 30 yards.
There's no doubt anymore. Tom crossed paths with something powerful that night. He watched a massive figure slip between the trees with silent, predatory precision. Nothing moves that smoothly in the wild. After the bone-deep howls that shook him earlier, one truth is unavoidable. Tom encountered a Bigfoot. Tonight on D-Max UK, we follow an investigator who isn't afraid to walk straight into the unknown. Bryce Johnson spends his nights deep in America's wildest terrain, searching for answers most people are too afraid to ask. On this trip, he finds himself in the backwoods of Oregon, a region of forgotten hollers and quiet communities that have lived with strange shadows for generations. On the edge of one of those pockets lives Tracy Turner, a preacher whose calm faith was shattered when the woods behind his home began to scream. With camera footage he's finally ready to share, we're heading straight into the heart of his encounter, and the mystery waiting in those trees.
You know, in Oregon, we were completely cut off. We were focusing our investigation in a remote part of the woods, but there are lots of pockets of communities backed up against these hollers. It's no doubt that they're gonna have Bigfoot encounters. I'm on my way to talk to a preacher named Tracy Turner. He's an honest and well-respected pillar of the community. He was hearing some crazy sounds out of his backyard. He said he's willing to share that camera footage with me. I can't wait to hear what he got.
Tracy waits on his porch, greeting Bryce with the steady confidence of a man used to calming others' fears. He stops at the edge of the backwoods, pointing to a thicket of ordinary-looking trees, until he begins to speak. Almost a year earlier, on a warm August night, he stepped outside with nothing more on his mind than finishing a cup of coffee. Then the peace shattered. From deep within the timber came a massive, guttural sound, so unnatural he froze, cup in hand, hoping he'd imagined it. The noise returned, louder and closer, and with a weight behind it that made him realize he wasn't alone.
So how long ago was this?
This was almost exactly a year ago. It was around August of last year.
That is right in our time frame.
And I came out here with a cup of coffee just to relax in the evening. And I heard it, and I thought, what was that? So I got my camera out, and that's when I made the video, hoping that it would do it again.
What made the sound so different? Tracy hesitated. He couldn't explain it, only that the instant it tore through the trees, a cold rush ran up his spine, hitting before his mind could catch up. Bryce noticed how Tracy rubbed his arms as he described it, reliving the terror. It wasn't just fear. It was his body reacting before he understood what he had heard. Even after a lifetime in these woods, nothing had sounded like that.
What made this sound so different?
I don't know, it was something that brought chills up on me when I heard it.
So then you actually had a physical response to this?
That's what scared me. I'd never heard anything like that.
Tracy pulled out his phone, hands tightening as he opened the file. When the audio played, they both froze. The sound wasn't just loud, it was wrong. A deep, ragged cry tore through the tree line, almost human, almost pleading. Friends had tried to brush it off as a wolf, but Tracy knew better. It sounded like someone in pain, and as the echo faded, the unsettling truth sank in. Whatever made that sound was out there, closer than anyone wanted to believe.
This is the video here. I have to turn it up.
Yeah. That's wild.
I've had friends say it may be a wolf. It's not a wolf. It wasn't a howl. I don't know, it sounded like a woman being hurt.
Really?
Screaming in pain almost.
Tracy's father had warned him for years about creatures that moved silently through the shadows, watching from places no one dared to look. Weeks later, those warnings became terrifyingly real. Locals searched for him after he disappeared, hiking up the hill to the cave where he had last been seen. When he finally emerged, he told them to leave, but as they turned, they froze. Standing beside him was a massive 7.5-foot creature, covered in thick hair, silently watching from the shadows.
Well, about a year later, some of the guys in the community got worried about him. They hadn't seen him, so they sent a party up through there to just see if he was all right. And they go up there and find this cave and go in and holler for him. He doesn't answer. And finally, as they're coming back out, he comes out of the cave and tells them to go away, leave him alone. He doesn't want to be bothered. And they turned around and walked off the hill. And as they were leaving, they looked back, and he was standing at the entrance to that cave beside this creature that was about 7.5 foot tall, covered in hair.
Bryce went deep into the forest, searching for answers no one else dared to seek. The whistle came first, sharp, haunting, cutting through the night air. Then another, closer, and their hearts hammered as flashlights trembled in their grip. Up ahead, a pair of eyes gleamed in the beam, unblinking and unafraid. Then, crack! A massive branch snapped somewhere deep in the woods. Every rustle, every snap sounded amplified in the oppressive silence. 200 feet felt like 2 inches. The forest isn't empty, and tonight it wants to be seen. The YouTube channel, A Flash of Beauty, is known for uncovering the unexplained and mysterious corners of the natural world. But for this adventure, the host teamed up with independent Bigfoot researcher Stan Standler. The perfect setting for an encounter with the unknown, unaware of just how close the night would bring them to something that most insist doesn't exist. In 1984, Stan's family moved to Northern Virginia, settling into a new home and quickly befriending their neighbors. Before long, the neighbors invited them on a trip to their cabin up in Ontario, Canada, a remote spot surrounded by dense forests and quiet trails. What was meant to be a simple getaway would soon turn into an experience none of them would ever forget.
In 1984 or 1985, my family and I moved to a new house in Northern Virginia. And we met these people that lived next door to my parents, and they quickly became fast friends, and we ended up going to a cabin that they had up in Ontario, Canada.
It was a warm summer night, and the glow from the window barely lit the room. At just 8 years old, lying in bed on a summer evening with just a sliver of fading light slipping through his window, his room was quiet, just a dresser to his right and a small desk beside it. But something made him open his eyes. A sound, a shift in the air, something he couldn't explain, and when he looked to his right, he froze. Standing in his bedroom, silent, still, and unmistakably real, was a young Sasquatch staring right at him.
I was 8 years old at this time. I was in my bedroom, and it was in the summertime. So there was still like a little bit of light coming through the window in my bedroom because I was in bed about to go to sleep. And so if my bed was like facing this way, to my right, there was a dresser and then a little desk thing. And at some point, I don't remember if I heard something or whatever it was that caught my attention, but I opened my eyes and I looked over to my right and I saw a young Sasquatch person standing in my bedroom.
They were just beyond the dresser, peering silently over the edge. No growls, no movement, just a wide, unsettling grin, as if trying to share a laugh without a sound. Their hair jutted out in every direction, wild and untamed, and the shape of their mouth was so strange and exaggerated that, as a child, he was reminded of a Muppet, chaotic, uncanny, and impossible to forget.
And they didn't do anything scary. They just looked at me and smiled and kind of opened their mouth like they were laughing, but no noise came out. So it was kind of like this gesture. They were like that. And he had crazy hair sticking out everywhere. And then his mouth was really wide. And so the way that his mouth opened, because of the wideness of his mouth and his hair, it reminded me at that time as a kid, it reminded me of Animal from the Muppets.
The sight of them froze him with absolute terror. They hadn't threatened him, hadn't moved toward him, yet their presence alone was overwhelming. All he could do was squeeze his eyes shut, hoping the moment would disappear. And when he finally dared to look again, the figures were gone. No sound, no footsteps, nothing. Just an empty room where they had been seconds before.
It scared me to death. There was nothing that happened that was like putting me in danger or anything like that. It was really just, they were there, scared me to death. I closed my eyes, and when I opened my eyes again, they weren't there anymore. They were just gone.
Over the years, they kept returning to the cabin 2 or 3 times every year, but each visit brought its own unsettling moments. In the dead of night, the cabin would groan and bang as if something unseen was moving inside. Footsteps echoed through the surrounding woods, always just out of sight, and the feeling of being watched never let up.
Throughout the years, we kept going to the cabin. So like 2 or 3 times a year, we would go to the cabin, and things would happen periodically. It would, you just hear the cabin would like make loud bangs in the middle of the night. There would be footsteps in the woods.
The moon hung high and full, casting an eerie glow over the still waters by the boathouse. Everything felt frozen in silence, too perfect, too quiet. Then, from the hilltop to his left, came heavy, deliberate footsteps crashing through the trees, each one echoing like it was meant to be heard.
Fishing by the boathouse, and it was just really quiet, just full moon, so you could see everything outside really. And I heard on this hilltop to my left, I heard like very deliberate, loud footsteps coming through the woods. And it was like someone wanted me to hear them. And I just remembered thinking like at that point, like I have to stop ignoring all this stuff. I gotta stop, just pretending that this stuff's just nothing to really pay attention to. And so I went home that trip, and I was living in Georgia at the time. And I went home from that trip and started researching as best I could.
Moments like this, 2 people witnessing the exact same thing and confirming every detail, are almost unheard of. But that night was different. They were walking a familiar trail, the kind they always explored without flashlights, letting their eyes adjust to the darkness. Eventually, they reached a spot where strange things had happened before, set their chairs in the middle of the path, and settled in to talk. Then it began. Over the rise of the hill, 2 glowing green points appeared, small, steady, and drifting toward them. At first, they thought they were lights, but soon there were 4, then 6, then even more, all moving in a slow, deliberate approach. And as the shapes drew closer, the truth hit them. They weren't lights at all.
For that type of thing to happen, where like you have two people seeing the same thing and like collaborating the experience with, is really rare. And so one night we were walking down this trail, and we don't use flashlights or anything. We just walk down after our eyes get adjusted. We find a place in the trail where we've had experiences before. We plop our chairs down and we just sit. So this one night we were sitting in the middle of the trail, and we're all just, you know, talking. And from over the hill, we see like some green eyes kind of coming, or at the time we didn't know they were eyes. It was just 2 green lights, and then there was 4 green lights, and then there was 6, and you know, just a bunch of little green lights coming towards us. They got closer, we realized it was eyes.
The woods aren't always a safe place. Some things lurking there don't have your best interests at heart. Yet among the shadows, there are beings capable of a kind of connection and care that feels almost impossible to find in the everyday world. The experience of it is rare, powerful, and unforgettable, something that stays with you long after you leave the forest. On this episode of the Travel Channel, David and Laura bring their children to a remote cabin surrounded by towering pines. But moments after stepping away to gather water, an unsettling cry echoes from deep within the trees, a sound no animal in these woods should make. David urged the kids to move faster, trying to keep his voice steady, but the fear leaking through every word gave him away. The forest around them had gone silent, unnaturally silent, except for that sound. It slid through the trees like something pacing just out of sight, close enough that Laura felt a cold breath against her skin, as if something invisible had passed right behind her. She saw nothing, no movement, no shape, only that heavy, suffocating presence closing in. David positioned himself behind the kids, every step slow and controlled, bracing for whatever was stalking them. He'd always been careful in the woods, but this time, caution felt pointless. Whatever this thing was, it already knew exactly where they were. But here's the question: if they couldn't see it, why did it feel like it could see them perfectly?
Hurry, kids. Don't trip.
We were scared and we didn't know what that was, couldn't figure it out, couldn't see anything, but it felt very close. I almost felt like I could reach out and touch it, it was so close.
Come on, David.
I'm coming. I'm very, very careful when we go into the woods. I'm very protective of my family.
The moment had left a heavy weight on the family, even as they tried to convince themselves it was nothing. Laura told herself it was probably just a deer, but the sound they had heard, deliberate, refused to fade from their minds. David couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, the creeping sense that something had circled them in the darkness. Every shadow in the woods now carried a memory of that night, and every rustle of leaves reminded them that whatever had been out there was still very real. The encounter had left its mark, not in injuries, but in a lingering unease that settled over the family like an invisible presence.
I wanted to go home. I said to Laura, I think we should leave. She didn't want to.
Look, it was probably a deer or something.
I really don't think that was a deer. Something's out there.
We had just gotten there. It would have just felt like such an incredible waste to have left.
Let's just relax, okay?
I grew up in the woods, whereas David didn't. So sometimes he can get a little more spooked than I do.
And then it happened again. That same unsettling noise returned, low and guttural, echoing through the trees with a weight that made the air itself feel heavy. The grunting repeated several times, each one slower, more deliberate than the last, until it was followed by a deep thump, a rumble that seemed to roll straight through the earth. David's unease grew with every sound. The noise didn't stop. It reverberated through the ground, climbing into their feet, their legs, and their chest, making their entire body vibrate with a fear they couldn't shake. The forest around them felt alive with something unseen, circling, watching, and making its presence undeniably known.
That humph noise again, and it was really deep and loud.
We heard that same grunting sound a few times, and then that thump, a deep rumble in the ground. Got pretty uneasy, and it carried on.
It was so loud and it reverberated the ground and it went up into my feet, into my chest, and I could feel my chest vibrating.
You hear things in the woods that no one talks about, and for a reason. Most people are too scared to share their experiences, afraid someone will laugh and call them crazy, dismissing what they saw or heard as impossible. You try to rationalize the sounds, the shadows moving just beyond the firelight, but deep down, you know some things out here aren't meant to be explained. This is KRQU, your gateway to the unexplained. What you're about to see. Some say it's impossible, but tonight, we'll find out for ourselves. For over half a century, the legend of a massive, shadowy creature has haunted forests around the world. Some call him Bigfoot, a mysterious half-man, half-beast whose sightings continue to spark fear and fascination. Recently, in the remote wilderness of New Mexico, locals claim they've glimpsed him again. Annie McCormack ventured into this untamed territory, joining trackers convinced the creature still roams there. With every step, the woods seemed to tense, as if aware of their presence, and she was about to learn just how real the legend might be.
More than 50 years ago, the legend of Bigfoot was born.
Since then, a mysterious, hairy, half-man, half-beast has been reported in many different parts of the world. In New Mexico, people claim to have seen the elusive creature as recently as last month. Annie McCormack just trekked across Bigfoot country with trackers who are convinced he's there.
No one could have predicted what lay ahead that night. He appeared suddenly, moving with a strange, stalking gait, arms swinging in an almost unnatural rhythm. Their eyes met, frozen in a tense, silent standoff that seemed to stretch on forever.
Never in my lifetime did I ever think that I was going to run into something like that.
It had a kind of weird walk, like hunched down and his arms swinging.
I saw it, it saw me, and he stood there.
J.C. Johnson and Jimmy had spent years chasing whispers in the wilderness, never fully believing the stories, until the day everything changed. Deep in the forests of the Four Corners area, they came face to face with something that defied explanation. For the first time, the legend of Sasquatch became real before their very eyes, leaving them stunned, questioning everything they thought they knew about the world around them.
It took some years before I actually realized that we had Sasquatch here in the Four Corners area.
Like, I couldn't believe that my eyes had actually seen that, you know.
TJ Biscordi couldn't shake the feeling as he scanned the campsite. From this vantage point, anything or someone could be watching them in the darkness, hidden just out of sight. The thought of eyes observing their every move from above, unseen, sent a chill straight through the group.
You see how easy of a vantage point for something in the night, in the dark, to be sitting right here, looking down at us at our campfire, and us down in our area?
A creature of unimaginable size is said to roam the forests around Farmington, yet it's never been caught. Until now, maybe. And the scariest part? It could be hiding right in the shadows behind us, unseen but always present.
So something that big is roaming around this area of Farmington. Where could it possibly live and hide where it's never been found? Well, it could be lurking right behind us.
Imagine a creature so massive it would need constant water and a huge supply of food just to survive. Yet much of New Mexico is harsh, dry desert, hardly the kind of place for a hidden giant to thrive. Ben Radford, managing editor of Skeptical Inquirer, points out a critical question. If Bigfoot is out there, why hasn't anyone ever found a body? Not a skeleton, not a trace, nothing.
In New Mexico, for example, a creature that's that big is going to have a consistent water source and a large food source. And much of New Mexico, as you know, is desert. It's arid. And there just isn't the water there to be able to sustain these sorts of creatures.
Ben Radford is managing editor of Skeptical Inquirer magazine, which explores myths and supernatural claims. He says there's a huge hole in the Bigfoot theory.
If these creatures are out there, they have to at some point. Why isn't anybody finding them?
How many people out there have seen a dead skeleton of a bear?
Everyone keeps saying it's just a bear, brushing off the sightings as nothing unusual. But deep down, this was something else. Something moving silently through the wilderness, watching unseen. At first, it couldn't believe that a creature like this could exist. hidden in plain sight among us. And the real question is, if this creature has been hiding in plain sight all along, how long before it decides you've noticed it too?
Time and time again, law enforcement comes back and local authorities, and they blame it on a bear.
I say it's a Bigfoot. I mean, I was real skeptical, at first that, there'd actually be, something moving around on this earth living amongst us.
Meet Fred Roll, a man whose name is whispered among those who chase the darkest forest legends. On Cabin in the Woods, he ventures deep into the wilderness, uncovering encounters most would call impossible, and exploring folklore far older and far deadlier than anyone imagined. Returning to a long-forgotten campsite, Fred found it destroyed, trees felled, debris scattered, a scene of chaos. At that moment, he realized the warnings in the old stories weren't just myths, they were real, and something was still out there, watching, waiting. The question is, what happened here? And what else lurks in the shadows?
What if I told you that the stories of monsters from indigenous folklore, passed on among many tribes for millennia, weren't actually folklore at all, but warnings? Warnings against something very real. Sounds ridiculous, right? Well, that's what Fred Roll of the Kuryong tribe thought too, until he experienced something that broke his family, turned him to drink for years, and still makes his hands shake.
Fred Roll came into the world in 1975, but his earliest memories weren't filled with laughter or childhood games. They were filled with cautionary tales that chilled him to the bone. His family would lean close, their voices low and serious. Never make a sound in the woods, never follow strange noises. And if you hear children laughing, make sure there's someone you know. Otherwise, something out there might be waiting for you. As a clever, curious kid, Fred thought they were just trying to scare him, to keep him from wandering too far. He didn't take the warning seriously. That all changed in 1983. While sneaking away into the woods to work on his tree fort, he felt the first brush of fear he hadn't known was real. Something was watching. Something was waiting. And in that moment, he realized the stories weren't just tales. They were survival instructions.
I was born in '75, and some of my earliest memories are that of my aunties and uncles and grandma and stuff warning us about don't whistle in the woods, don't ever go following whistles in this. If you hear kids laughing in the woods, you got to make sure it's one of your cousins, or otherwise you don't follow, because the hairy man will steal you and eat you. And I was a savvy little kid, so I always assumed that they're pulling our leg to keep us out of the woods kind of thing, until 1983 when I was sneaking away to work on my tree fort.
As Fred made his way down the trail, something pulled his attention toward a dense stand of alders ahead. At first, he thought he was looking at his Uncle Leo, a tall man he would have recognized anywhere. But within seconds, he realized this figure towered far above the willows, far taller than any person he knew. A massive, dark silhouette stood roughly 70 yards away, shifting slowly from side to side as if studying him. Others had heard the scream too, and when Fred burst back toward the group, breathless and terrified, he wasn't just in trouble for wandering off. He was shaken by the realization that the old warnings weren't stories anymore. They were real.
So as I'm going along, my attention was drawn to there was a stand of alders that I had to pass through that was part of the trail. And I saw what I thought was my Uncle Leo at first. He was a really tall guy, so I was like, oh, shit, I'm in trouble. I realized, wait a minute, this thing is taller than those willows, it's much taller than my uncle. This thing it was just a dark silhouette at about 70 yards, started swaying back and forth, and I'm just staring at it, and then it screamed at me, and I was gone. And everyone else heard the scream, so when I came tearing back, I kind of got into trouble for going away from the crowd, but it became real that day.
As Fred recounts the encounter, it becomes terrifyingly clear. He remembers every detail with razor-sharp clarity. Most haunting of all is the creature's swaying motion, rocking side to side, a behavior well documented among great apes when they are angry or agitated. If Fred were fabricating this, he would have to possess an extraordinary knowledge of primate behavior. Now picture it, a colossal figure, over 10 feet tall, swaying in frustration, its gaze fixed on you in the darkness, and just when you think the terror has reached its peak, it's only just beginning.
As we get into this encounter, it's immediately clear that Fred recalls all the details with haunting clarity. One of the most striking things he describes is the creature's side-to-side rocking movement, a behavior well documented, by the way, among known great ape species when they're angry or agitated. So if Fred were making this up, he'd have to be unusually well-versed in primate behavior. Just picture this for a minute. Something over 10 feet tall, swaying back and forth in frustration as it stares you down in the dark. And yet, as terrifying as this image is, it's really only just the beginning, because things are about to get.
A scream ripped through the night, echoing across the river. On the bluff, a massive dark silhouette loomed, swaying as if sizing up its prey. Rocks rained down, smashing the tarp, covering the moose quarters, and sending them crashing to the boat, chilling everyone to the bone. In that moment, it became terrifyingly clear. This wasn't a story or a warning. It was real. And it was hunting.
We heard the first scream, and so we looked up on the bluff, and it was about 65 yards across, about the same height off the where the river level was, and there was a big dark silhouette up there and just screaming. We were inside the boat at that distance, and it was still ear piercing. We're like, whoa. And we started hearing Harry man, and the splashing of rocks. This thing was throwing rocks at the fishing boat. And that's when things got real, because one of the rocks busted through. We had an A-frame set up with tarp over it to hang the moose quarters.
Imagine standing where Fred stood, deep in the heart of the wilderness, when suddenly a massive creature, towering over 10 feet, launches rocks at you, screaming with pure fury. Every shout, every crashing stone sends adrenaline surging through your veins. Terrifying, absolutely. But for Fred, this wasn't a story. This was a nightmare unfolding in real life. And now, after everything Fred has faced, the destroyed campsite, the towering shadow, the screams, the rocks raining down, one question remains. If something this massive, this intelligent, and this angry still stalks the wilderness, how many more are out there, waiting, just beyond sight, just beyond the trees? On the YouTube channel Wildman of the Wilderness, real encounters from the deep woods come to life through first-hand testimony and raw emotion. A witness, Amy recalls a night when something unexplainable happened in the darkness, an experience so disturbing it stayed with them for years. Whatever they encountered that night would haunt their dreams and leave a mark they could never forget.
Just telling it comes the worst yell that I've ever heard. It was so loud and so powerful. I was actually worried that I was having heart rhythm, something, palpitations, I'm not sure, but something was going on. I don't know what it was, but that's something I'll never forget. And for a long time afterwards, I really would wake up with nightmares from it.
One summer, Project Zubok was invited deep into the heart of Alagna National Forest, joined by a reporter and photographer from the Wall Street Journal. They found themselves on a long-forgotten logging road, overgrown and treacherous, where only faint traces of old campsites remained.
We were the only ones camping on that road. You could hardly pass on that road. The potholes were so big. So some time went by, and it was, pretty far into the night, and I woke up because I felt...
As darkness settled over the forest, an unsettling presence stirred, something unseen, yet impossible to ignore, leaving a lingering sense of dread that would haunt the night. Hours passed in uneasy silence, until suddenly the stillness shattered. A deafening, primal roar ripped through the darkness, more powerful than anything they had ever heard. It seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once, reverberating through the trees and freezing every nerve. Whatever had made the sound was unseen, yet its presence was undeniable. A force in the forest that would haunt the night and linger in memory long after.
Comes the worst yell that I've ever heard. I'm not sure how long it lasted, but enough time to make me concerned. It was so loud and so powerful. And the only thing that I can describe it like is if you see like those island warriors that just do that bellowing.
Fear gripped her like a living thing, not just for herself, but for the friends she had brought into the forest's shadow. By the next morning, the unease lingered, heavy and undeniable. Tina admitted she had nearly fled in the night, certain something was seriously wrong. Monica and the others shared the same shiver of dread. They had all felt it, a presence that defied explanation. Questions swirled as they tried to reason it out. Was it a prank, a visitor who had tracked them here, or something far stranger, something the forest itself had woken to make its presence known? The uncertainty hung between them, as thick and suffocating as the night that had refused to release them.
The next day, we were talking about what had happened. Tina was talking about how she thought she needed to leave before the reporter even got there because she had thought she had a medical emergency the night before. Monica and I both were like, we felt the same thing. All three of us had felt it. We really tried to do our due diligence in figuring out what it could have been.
For too long, science has sidelined the voices of Native American and First Nations communities, dismissing their knowledge as folklore. Yet history tells a strikingly different tale. Across Africa, creatures like the elusive cross-river gorilla were once considered nothing more than myth, until explorers proved they were real. Time and again, beings once labeled as cryptids, from mountain gorillas to orangutans, revealed that the stories passed down through generations were rooted in truth. In the world of Bigfoot research, these patterns serve as a haunting reminder. What is dismissed as legend may be closer to reality than anyone dares to imagine.
When you look into, for example, the cross-river gorillas over in Africa, they were thought to be mythological for a very long time until they weren't. You know, mountain gorillas used to be cryptids. Orangutans used to be cryptids. And I wonder all the time if we're doing the same thing here, if our Native Americans who are telling over and over again about these hairy men, wild people.
She often found herself staring into the darkness, haunted by a single thought. Are we repeating the mistakes of the past? For centuries, indigenous peoples told stories of strange wild beings that roamed the forests, creatures dismissed as folklore, even when they were real. And now, in these same woods, the warnings echoed again, overlooked and underestimated. The realization left a bitter sting, a quiet fury that the truth could be so easily ignored while the forest held its secrets, patient and untamed.
Maybe we're doing the same thing that happened to the indigenous people over there. And it really kind of makes me angry. And one of the things what I want to say is one of the things I'm the most proud of with Project Zoobook is we have a whole group of scientists, and we have wildlife biologists, primatologists, marine biologists, all kinds of scientists involved now. They are all open-minded to that, and they all are very willing.
A part of her ached to believe Bigfoot was real, yet she also understood that the truth, whatever it might be, would not shatter her. The thrill was in the hunt itself, in the unseen and the unknown, in the shadows that whispered secrets no one had yet uncovered. What truly mattered was turning that curiosity into action, uniting skeptics and believers, blending passion with science, and chasing the mysteries that had eluded the world for generations. In that pursuit, every discovery, every hint, every heartbeat in the forest became its own kind of wonder.
Yes, I want Bigfoot to be real, but if, my heart breaks and they're not, it won't really break, but there's so much other good you can do, and there's so many other things we can be looking for, so why not work together with science and harness the power of Bigfooters?
Meet Gaz, the adventurer behind Grizzly Gaz, whose videos take viewers deep into solo camping and bushcraft expeditions, often with his loyal dog, Fendi. On a familiar stretch of woodland, Gaz felt the usual thrill of the wild, but tonight was different. As wind whistled through the trees, he noticed a flicker near the so-called witch's den. Shadows shifted, and for a moment it seemed as if someone, or something, was watching. In the wilderness, even the safest places can hold secrets waiting to be discovered.
I always feel like somebody's just gonna pop its head up over. Annoyed out already. And there it is, the witch's den. You ready, mate? Yeah? You can hear the wind just whistling through those trees. I'm sure I just saw a light or maybe some eye shine.
The forest was nearly pitch black, and Gaz could barely make out the path ahead, moving cautiously. A branch snapped somewhere in the shadows, making him pause. In a place like this, the mind plays tricks. Wind rattling branches, trees groaning under unseen weight. Every creak and whisper of the woods seemed amplified, and even the familiar forest felt alive, watching, and unpredictable. Tonight, the wilderness had its own rules, and Gaz was about to learn them the hard way.
Can't see much in here. But let's go find the witch's den. Sure, I just heard a branch break over there somewhere.
Upon entering the darkened forest, the usual calm of the evening gave way to a tense unease. Wind tore through the trees, sending branches crashing to the ground. The trunks groaned and squeaked under its force, echoing through the shadows. Gaz paused, eyes scanning the restless darkness, the flickering movement of leaves making the woods seem alive. Even the wind itself carried a weight. The atmosphere pressed in, setting a chilling tone before the night had even truly begun.
Wind knocking branches over. Trees squeaking. Hear that wind.
Gaz's gaze locked on a faint glimmer deep in the shadows. For a moment, the forest fell silent. Then came the subtle, chilling reflection. Eyeshine, watching from the darkness, deliberate and unblinking, sending a shiver down his spine. Branches cracked and snapped all around him, echoing through the shadowed forest. Gaz's eyes darted from shape to shape. That's proper creepy. The tension pressed in from every direction, and for the first time that night, he admitted it. He was on edge. Definitely on edge.
Cracking and stuff. Look at this, look. That's just proper creepy, that, isn't it?
Flashes of movement appeared through the shadows. "Someone's been here," came the whispered observation. A fresh cut on a tree drew the eye. Sharp, unmistakable, likely no more than a week old. The forest seemed alive, trunks creaking and groaning as if shifting away, each sound amplifying the tension. Darkness pressed in from every side, and every rustle hinted that something, or someone, was watching.
Keep seeing flashes of stuff like, oh look, someone's been here. That looks like a fresh cut, does that? That's definitely fresh. Probably a week old or something, if that.
A sound drifted through the darkness, faint at first, almost like a dog. But there was something off about it. Whatever it was, it moved with weight, immense and deliberate. Eyes caught a glint of reflection up along the side of a wall, large, unblinking, and watching. The presence felt enormous, and the instinct was clear. It was time to move, fast, before the forest revealed any more of its secrets.
Whatever it is, it sounds big, so I think me and Fenzel should get out of here. Pretty sure I saw eye shine right up there, on the side of that wall. It looked pretty big as well. Hold on.
Advice had always been to look up, but tonight the only concern was the branches overhead, creaking and threatening. A sudden sound cut through the stillness. A startled exclamation broke the silence. Something, a sneeze or something eerily close, echoed from the shadows ahead. The source was just out of sight, yet impossible to ignore. The noise was wrong, unnatural, sending a shiver down the spine and pushing the tension higher with every heartbeat.
Everyone always tells me to look up, but the only reason why I'm looking up is for branches. Right. Oh shit. Come on, let's get out of here. I'm sure I've just heard someone sneeze.
Movement was slow, deliberate, creeping around him, every step careful in the dim light. Then came a sudden, jarring sound. Something had struck the window, sharp and startling. Eyes scanned the shadows, catching a glimpse of something small yet unsettling, watching every cautious move.
And I'm creeping round the bed. Creeping. With that? All right here. Someone just hit me window.
Though the forest eventually fell silent and the night passed without further incident, the experience left an uneasy mark. Was it merely the tricks of the wind and shadows, or had something far more deliberate been watching from the darkness? On Oregon Public Broadcasting, the search for Bigfoot is examined through a very different lens, one that moves beyond cameras, traps, and expeditions. While countless films and docuseries portray hunters combing forests in hopes of capturing or proving the creature's existence, Indigenous voices from the Pacific Northwest offer a deeper perspective. To them, Bigfoot is not something to be found but a spiritual presence woven into ancestral stories, cultural memory, and everyday life. Rather than a myth to chase, Bigfoot is a living idea, respected, remembered, and quietly acknowledged across generations.
It's interesting to see all of these searching for Bigfoot films, documentaries, docuseries, where they're literally out there looking to find Bigfoot, capture him. I don't really know what they're expecting to do. They'll never find him because Bigfoot is spirit. Being a native person, especially from the Northwest, Bigfoot is in all of our stories. Bigfoot is thought about, considered almost weekly in people's lives, almost daily.
No one anticipated that a piece would be created for Bigfoot. Yet, as the idea took shape, certain elements felt inevitable. Shells intertwined into the design, accents of raw wood, and a cloak of the darkest hues. Bigfoot had always held a fascination. Glimpses caught here and there, fleeting, unconfirmed, and always referred to as he, though no one could truly know if it was male or female. Memories of Pearson Creek lingered vividly, echoes of that distant call piercing the stillness, a place disturbed, and everyone knew Bigfoot did not welcome such intrusions. The forest seemed alive, watching, waiting.
Never expected that I would be creating piece for Bigfoot. And so when I'm thinking about this dress, I knew it needed to have shells. I knew it needed to have wood on it. I knew it needed to be a dark, dark color.
I've always liked Bigfoot. I've seen him a couple times. And here we say he, because it really can't see a gender, so we don't know if we're seeing a he or a she.
Remember when we heard Bigfoot up at Pearson Creek?
Well, there was logging going on up there, and they do not like.
Whenever someone ventures into the forest searching for Bigfoot, it is almost always white men leading the way. Rarely do they glimpse the creature itself. But the forest has a way of revealing other things, hidden fears, forgotten memories, pieces of themselves they never expected to confront. Every snapped twig, every shadow shifting in the undergrowth seems to watch them back. In the hunt for a legend, they often find something far more unsettling, the quiet truths that the wilderness keeps for itself.
Destructive stuff to some of their equipment.
Every time I've heard of somebody looking for Bigfoot, well, it's mostly white men, they never find Bigfoot, but what they do find out is a lot about themselves.
That's true.
For native residents, they have always seen him more than a legend, as part of the family, a shadow among the trees, quiet, yet ever present. Generations have coexisted with him, feeling his presence without needing proof. Some may doubt his existence, but those who know the forests understand. He has walked these lands for centuries, unseen, yet never absent, a living secret of the wilderness.
I think the way we view him is that he's like family. And I think that we have coexisted with him for a long time. It makes me think of why people might say Sasquatch isn't real. And it's like, that's clearly up to you, and you can believe the way you want to believe. But I've always believed that this is definitely something that has lived here for a long time.
In the world beyond the mainstream, the question isn't whether Sasquatch exists. For native people, that is never the point. Their stories, passed down through generations, carry a knowledge older than any map or record. These encounters are vivid, profound, and undeniable. Reminders that the unseen still moves among them. Every rustle in the trees, every shadow in the twilight whispers the truth. They are part of a larger mystery that refuses to be solved.
You look at the larger mainstream, really it comes down to an issue of whether or not you believe in Sasquatch. For Native people, that's not the issue. Our oral traditions and our oral history are actually a kind of knowledge system. Our people will continue to have these kinds of experiences, as profound as they are. And that experience just tells us that we are still a part of this greater mystery.
If Bigfoot has quietly walked these forests for generations, witnessed only in fleeting shadows, whispered in stories, and felt more than seen, then what does it truly mean to encounter him? Is he a spirit of the wilderness, a mirror to our own fears, or something far older? Windwalker. Outdoor brings stories from the heart of the wilderness, where silence can be louder than fear. Everyone who has walked these woods carries a memory that chills them to the bone. Tonight, one such experience unfolds, an encounter that turned an ordinary hike into a night no one could forget.
Hi guys, it's story time. I'm pretty sure most of you guys watching have had maybe an experience in the woods that was scary. And I know a lot of times when I go into different forums, somebody will pose the question, what was the scariest thing that ever happened to you?
In 1988, deep in a quiet corner of the forest, a hunter climbed a tall pine tree, setting up his stand among the shadows. Nearby, a couple of apple trees hung heavy with fruit, a natural lure for deer that wandered through this isolated spot. The canopy above was thick, the towering pines casting long, dark shadows that turned the woods into a maze of light and gloom. What began as a routine archery hunt soon felt different, Strange noises, shifting shadows, and the kind of stillness that makes a person wonder if they're truly alone.
Back in 1988, I was archery hunting out of this tree. Had a climbing tree stand. We have a couple apple trees right here. It's usually, to bring the deer in. I mean, I come up and check just about every summer to see if there's apples on them, because if there's apples, there'll be deer coming in here, these isolated apple trees. But anyway, then this tree stand hunting. Now, back then, this used to get real dark in here because these pine trees were alive. There's 2 of them, and they provide a lot of shade. It used to be thick in here. I mean, that was how many years ago? That was, 30 years ago?
As he shifted his weight in the tree, turning to secure the strap on his stand so he could climb down, a sudden sound cut through the stillness. It was not a roar, but something sharper. A brief, unsettling growl. It carried the same tone someone might use to startle a child. The sound came without warning, close enough to demand attention. His reaction was immediate. He reached out instinctively, convinced at first that someone nearby was playing a cruel joke. But in the fading light, surrounded by the quiet woods, there was no one in sight, only the echo of that strange sound lingering in the air.
So I got turned around. I was trying to unfasten my strap from my tree stand so I could climb down the tree. And when I did that, I heard a growl. I guess you could call it a growl. I'm going to try to imitate it the best I can. It went, "Rawr!" And it sounded just like that, like I was saying the growl. Just like when you would try to scare a little kid, you'd get "rawr!" Like, that's what it sounded like. It didn't sound like a snarl. It wasn't deep. It was kind of high-pitched.
It didn't take long for him to understand this was no prankster hiding in the trees. The sound belonged to some creature, something alive, powerful. It wasn't just loud. It shook the air around him, rattling his chest like the deep thrum of a turkey gobbling too close for comfort. He froze for a moment, then instinct took over. A low growl escaped him in return, small but defiant, as if to challenge the unseen presence lurking in the shadows of the forest. The silence that followed was heavier than any darkness he had ever known.
So I realized, it didn't take very long, I realized that that wasn't a person. Whatever that was some kind of animal. Now this sound was loud, that "rawr!" It was loud that I could feel it vibrating off my chest. Similar to when if you've ever had a gobbler gobble at close range, that loud, you could feel it in your chest. Well, that's what this was like. So anyways, it growled, I growled back.
Unarmed and alone, he sat frozen, weighing his options as darkness thickened around him. The growl came again, low and menacing, echoing through the trees. Night had fallen fully now, and the forest had become a shadowed maze, every movement uncertain, every sound amplified. Finally, he made a decision. He couldn't stay perched in that tree all night. He had to descend. Heart pounding, he began climbing down as fast as he dared, shouting into the night, commands, warnings, anything to break the silence. "Go away! Leave me alone!" His voice bounced through the woods, a desperate attempt to mask the sound of his own movements, a feeble shield against whatever was lurking unseen below.
Sitting there debating what to do, it growls again. I'm scared. I mean, it's getting later and later. It's pretty dark by now. I mean, it's hard to see with just your eyes. So I just made up in my mind that I was going to have to come down that tree one way or the other. I was not going to spend the whole night in that tree. Even though I thought about it, I was not spending the whole night in that tree. So I come down the tree as fast as I can. The whole time I'm coming down the tree, I was just yelling, "Get out of here, leave me alone, get out of here, just go, get." And I was basically yelling that so that, hoping that would cover up the noise if I heard something, just to cover up the noise of hearing it.
The fear from that night lingered long after he left the forest. For 4 years, he avoided that area entirely, unable to shake the memory of the growl that had filled the trees with an almost tangible presence. Even decades later, he couldn't identify what he had heard. Nothing in recordings or other wildlife came close to that haunting sound. 30 years have passed, yet the memory remains vivid. Now, whenever he returns to the woods, he never ventures unarmed. The forest may be quiet, the shadows may seem ordinary, but the memory of that night reminds him that some encounters are not meant to be forgotten, and some mysteries of the wild refuse to be explained.
I was scared. And I have to say, I did not come back to this area for years. I was not hunting these woods for years. I'm not sure what it was. With the internet, even today, I've listened to recordings of bobcats, different kind of sounds, growls, and I have not found anything that sounded like this did. So that's a true story. That happened to me right here in this spot 30 years ago, and I haven't forgot it yet. And even today, anytime I'm in these woods hunting or anything.
So, what really prowls these woods when the shadows grow long, and how many of these encounters remain hidden just beyond our sight? But the forest doesn't give up its secrets so easily. There are still eyes watching from the shadows, and whispers that refuse to be ignored. Stay with Scary Encounter, because the next encounter is closer, darker, and far more unsettling than anything you've seen tonight.